Hello everyone, and welcome to the Commercial Awareness Compass, your weekly guide to developing commercial insight that goes beyond just the headlines. Each week, we take one major story and break it down to help you progress through 3 levels: beginner, intermediate, and advanced commercial awareness. Whether you're just starting out or already have some understanding, this program is here to help you think like a commercial lawyer. By the end of today's session, you'll have practical insights that you can use in applications and interviews. So my name is Daniel Shepherd, and I'm a law conversion student and a future trainee solicitor. And today I'm joined by Emma, a solicitor with extensive experience in commercial law. She'll help us explore today's key legal and business topic, offering insight into how lawyers tackle complex commercial challenges. So thank you for joining us today, Emma. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. So to start off, would you be able to break down this week's commercial awareness topic?
I can, and happily, because it's such an exciting one, and you might think that I'm geeking out a little bit. But as you've seen from the title and the topic that we're going to be covering today, it's something that has been going on for years, and even prior to those listening or yourself, Dan, or anyone that's interested in this, even knowing a little bit about law, you would have noticed this first, where it's like something that's relevant in life, and then you can add the legal part onto it, which is why I think it's great to talk about with the compass. So we're talking about supermarket IP laws, and IP, the first thing for me to say is intellectual property. If you hear that abbreviation, that's what that means. Don't worry if you didn't know what it meant before. No judgment here, but if you did, completely fine. We all do now. And that we're looking at what's been going on completely under our noses for all of this time and trying to unpick some of the examples and then what it might look like for a lawyer to work on those things. And then, of course, as we get towards the more advanced stage, looking at the strategy and business risk and why it's important as well. So super excited to get into the interesting parts of this, that's for sure.
So what are some of the key legal and business concepts involved here?
So you have IP, which is, of course, the first one that I've mentioned. And you could see that as both a legal and a business concept, because you've got IP in the sense of a business's goodwill. So as another key term for you, goodwill is essentially what a business holds in its reputational arena. And a lot of the time on a company's financial statements, you'll see that as a line. And that's usually related to reputation, any trademarks they've got, any brand recognition that is attached to the company, and that's usually got a value attached to it. So that's more of the businessy side. But if you look at IP on a legal side, you've got the different legal classifications of intellectual property and what that means in the legal realm and how the courts interpret it and what needs to happen from a legal standpoint to make sure all of those things are registered or not registered, depending on what kind of IP it is. But just to beef that up a little bit more from the legal side, just some examples. You've got trademarks, which you may have heard of. You've got copyright, design rights, patents, things like that. So it's interesting to have those things in mind, whether or not you've got the knowledge of it, because they can cross over from the business to the legal realm. And then some other words or concepts that you might hear about are like attaching the value to the business, relating to those things, and the commercial risk that we'll get onto a little bit later.
And why does this issue matter to businesses and law firms?
It matters because if somebody is, and I use these terms loosely, no accusations made, but someone's accused of infringing someone's goodwill, copyright, IP, affecting their reputation, then it's going to have some sort of impact on commercials somewhere. All these businesses, no matter the size, want to protect their own brand, and that's because they've got a certain part of the market that is theirs. For example, there's a lot of recognition that goes with a trademark. So if we think about on the screen, we can see the All About Law trademark, I guess it's trademarked, and the logos that you've got along with Commercial Awareness Compass, for example. I know, absolutely, when I see that, I know it's all about law. If there's any confusion around any of those things, it's not great for a business. So to use a different example, if you've got the McDonald's Golden Arches, we all know what that means. But if someone is abusing that and incorrectly using the McDonald's trademark and trying to pass off as something else, it's not that business. So McDonald's has got a huge risk as to they can't control it. They'll have to shut it down. They'll have to go through the processes to do it because somebody is trying to act as if they are McDonald's when they actually aren't, and then trying to commercialise and capitalise on that. So they'll be taking money essentially from the market of McDonald's. So that's why it's important to businesses too.
And as we round out the beginner level, what might be some common misconceptions that people have about this topic?
Common misconceptions that TM after a trademark might always mean that it's trademarked, or a little R in a circle. Like, do your research on those things. That's just some practical things. People can post whatever they want on the internet or online, or trying and make themselves look legitimate through a system. For example, there's ways that lawyers have to check that, and there's registers for trademarks, or there will be some sort of creative work that might not be registered, but it will be established who the owner of that copyright is, for example. So don't fall into the trap of somebody saying it's protected under IP. You need to get that proof for it being so, or making the necessary assessment if there isn't a formal register for it. That's a common misconception. Another misconception is that if somebody sees something somewhere in a shop that looks like something else, that it's automatically in breach of a trademark. It won't always be. Sometimes trademarks, the registrations are quite limited. So, people are probably screaming at the screen and dying for me to mention the Caterpillar Wars. A trademark for a certain Caterpillar cake might only be registered for, this is not true by the way, I'm just giving you an example, for a certain size of cake. So it might be, we can use a caterpillar's face on a chocolate cake for a cake that is of so many slices. I don't know, I've not looked into that. But it's quite common that a trademark is quite limited. And what that means, and another way of looking at that is a class. So some trademarks can be registered in certain classes. So if somebody sees a trademark in a different arena, something called the same thing, but it's in a different class, different service, it doesn't mean that it's breached the other one. You've just got to make sure you get into the detail of what it's registered for and what that is. So also don't make the automatic assumption that, oh, that's not right, you can't use that name on that thing because such and such does that in retail or in food, hospitality. Don't fall into that trap either. That's why we need lawyers involved in this so we can make that assessment.
So at the beginner level, the goal is to understand the basics, what's happening and why it matters in a broad sense. This foundation is crucial for moving to deeper business and legal impacts. So now that we've got a solid understanding of the basics, we'll dive into how this issue affects businesses and why legal guidance is crucial. So would you be able to explain how this issue specifically impacts companies in this sector and why they might need legal advice?
I can, yes. So we spoke about that protection, Dan, didn't we, of a brand? And sometimes people deliberately try to exploit it. Sometimes it might be accidental. Sometimes it might be a risk decision that's deliberately taken, even if they feel like it might be on the edge. And I'm sure a lot of us can think of a supermarket that do that quite regularly. And it's quite obvious that happens. So the reason why you might need to get a lawyer involved, or why you might need to think about that, is the defense of your business, essentially. So it links to this protection. We've seen recently, and we'll get onto a concrete example now, that Lidl and Tesco have been actually in court about this. So if you think of the Lidl logo, or Lidl, I'm not sure, Lidl in my northern accent, we'll call it Lidl.
I'd go with Lidl, yeah.
Okay, I'm with you, Dan. We'll go with Lidl. So Lidl has a yellow circle essentially and a blue square, and it's got Lidl within it. Tesco's Club Card logo, not the Tesco one, but the Club Card Prices logo, is a blue square with a yellow circle, and it says Club Card Prices within it. And they've been battling this out in court. I think it's since 2021. around if that was abuse of Lidl's trademark. Lidl sued Tesco and said, you shouldn't be using this. It's passing off. It's confusing because we're both in the same sector. It looks the same. It's got the same colours. Tesco have mainly lost, but they did succeed for a little part of that, which was that Tesco said, well, you registered your trademark in bad faith. And bad faith essentially just means not in a very friendly or collaborative or in a way that you should have done under the law. So they've been battling it out. So that's just an example. Think how much money those guys have spent in court. That's why businesses need to be hot on to this and think about how they can protect their own brand, because Lidl don't want to be confused with Tesco. Tesco don't want to be vice versa because they're direct competitors. So the main thing I imagine business will be thinking about is protecting their brand against competitors in the first place.
Yeah, and I doubt they'll be able to get their legal fees on club card price. So it wouldn't. It's definitely an expensive process.
Absolutely.
But what regulatory or compliance considerations would come into play here?
Regulatory and compliance. That's an interesting one. And I don't think there's going to be a heck of a lot with this, to be honest, unless you can think of any, Dan. But top of my head, regulatory wise, I think this might be pretty slim on the regulatory side. Compliance, maybe thinking of different, if we're looking at retail, maybe food standards. If we're looking at any other trademark for like clothes and things, I think we're quite limited there. So if I was to give any advice as to if you were to raise this in an interview or something like that, I wouldn't heavily focus on regulatory and compliance. If you agree with that, Dan.
Yeah, also I think it is one of those where if you kind of look on the outside, especially with like food and stuff like that, there probably are a lot of regulations involved, but maybe not as specifically with the IP in this case. Yeah. But what are the legal risks and challenges that businesses face in this situation?
Legal risks and challenges. I'm going to spin this on its head now and do it from the point of view of maybe supermarkets that decide to deliberately take a legal risk and maybe navigate the challenges in an interesting way. So we'll talk about Aldi, and you only need to walk down the middle aisle of Aldi to have a look at some of the goods that they sell, and some have been challenged, some haven't, and you only need to go on TikTok or social media to go look at these Aldi dupes that have arrived this week. Dupes is this very common thing that Aldi are more or less the champion of, but they are taking a risk within that decision to market something so wide that looks so similar to something that has got brand protection. So we know about the Caterpillar thing. I do feel like Aldi have been done an injustice with the Caterpillar thing, because you look on Waitrose. I mean, I did check this morning. Waitrose is currently unavailable, to be fair. But I think you can still get Wiggle. Is it Wiggle, the Caterpillar from Tesco? Sainsbury's still sell theirs. I don't know. I feel like Aldi have been a bit hard done by M&S in this case. But generally, if you look at it the other way around, what businesses are starting to do now is be really creative with some of the risk taking. So there's some certain brands of candle, there's certain brands of beauty items that you just put them next to each other. It doesn't need a lawyer or us to talk to realise there's some similarities, but there'll be so far that you can go in law, and there'll be so many things that you will be thinking about. They are clearly making a huge profit from that. Someone somewhere has decided a legal strategy risk based upon it. So the challenges that they are facing are ones that they've tried to look at quite creatively and try and capitalise on that and make some more money out of it. On the other hand, if you think about all of the brands that might not be happy with some of the approaches that have been taken, the risk and challenge for them is that why would anybody pay 3, 4, 5 times for something? Of course, you've got to think about the quality aspects and everything else. But if you can pass something off for something else, and supermarkets like Aldi are getting away with it, the poor company that they believe their trademark or any other IP is being infringed, the risk and challenge to them is that their business could essentially take a huge hit commercially. So you've got to take that in the round as well.
And I think one of the things that kind of leads on with, especially with the creativity of how they're maybe making similar sort of products is how they've used social media around this. I know that the kind of free Cuthbert kind of memes, or the kind of Instagram or Twitter spats between different supermarket chains has generated a lot of publicity in the past, and kind of how they play into that as a risk in order to gain kind of support and also some publicity for their products.
That's right. And
Yeah,
what
I
happened
think
with that case, Dan, was, sorry to interrupt, spoke over you there.
Oh no, you're fine.
What happened with that case was it was settled out of court between M&S and Aldi. So a confidential, and we'll get onto this in the advance, which we might move to in a little second. But it was settled out of court. So part of that agreement was that Aldi could still continue to sell Cuthbert. But who knows what's been paid, what's been agreed? We don't know. But that's where the legal part comes in.
Yeah, it was definitely a big case at the time, and it's kind of, I must say, caterpillar cakes are kind of some of the faces of trademark wars.
Yeah,
like one of the most commonly seen. So yeah, it's definitely had an impact. So at the intermediate level, think about how businesses are affected and how law firms support them. This is where commercial issues connect to practical legal work. So as we go into the advanced level, we'll shift our focus to the bigger picture and what long-term implications businesses and law firms should anticipate. So what proactive advice might law firms offer to clients in this situation to both manage risks and seize opportunities?
Make sure you have your IP protected. For those that are Dragon's Den fans, one of the first questions that are asked is, have you got a patent for this invention, or have you got, is it a registered trademark, for example, all of those things. It's just the basics really of making sure, because otherwise it's a free-for-all. People can use it, unless you've got goodwill established in it. It's a free-for-all and people can just use it, and it's a lot more difficult to protect. So if you have nothing in law to protect in the first place, then you're at a loss. So that's one of the most important bits of advice that you would give as a lawyer, is to make sure that everything's registered, up to date, renewed when it needs to be, because these things run out sometimes. Just making sure that you're keeping up to date with it across the classes for a trademark, again, across the classes that you want to use it for. Another bit of advice could be to make sure you've got capacity or resource for somebody to continually check who is trying to register something that competes with yours. So there is an appeal process when a trademark's registered that allows somebody to say, that's not right, I don't agree with it. But you've got to be hot on it. You've got to get the notifications. As soon as there's a trademark registered for Asda or Waitrose, or like that, their teams will be all over it. They should be, to make sure that, or even something similar, like one letter change, but it's in retail for a huge supermarket. They'll be over it, to make sure that that's done. So make sure you've got some sort of ongoing checking as well. And then the third thing, I guess, is just to decide what money, what value you're going to accrue behind protecting this brand, because it's going to happen. Some huge supermarkets, like the ones that we've seen, whether it's the products themselves or the actual name of the supermarket, anything in retail, people are going to try and abuse that and try and make money from it. So how much are you willing to put aside from your yearly profits, things like that, to make sure that you've got some money to defend these things, because they are expensive, but it is sometimes worth doing that. So lawyers will be thinking about the potential cost it could cause to defend those things as well.
So a lot of it is kind of proactivity in ensuring that the companies are up to date with ensuring that everything's protected, and kind of keeping an eye out for anyone who might either try to infringe on that or appeal against your the copyright. What broader trends would this issue fit into, and how should businesses prepare for future challenges? So are there similar sort of IP disputes in either the supermarket space or similar spaces which you can kind of see coming up almost, or like comparative?
Yeah, we see it everywhere. I've mentioned a few other different examples, not just supermarkets, throughout this, where IP is being infringed. We have a lot of websites now that sell dupes of everything, and there's a lot of handbags, clothing, sportswear. Lots of companies are suffering at the moment from people walking around in gear that they've designed, that they've put the money and the resource behind, that they're trying to sell, probably for a luxury price tag, and then someone's found a hole in that and is selling it for much cheaper. So there's that trend, but it also feeds into ESG and all of those sorts of things, fast fashion. There's a few trends that you could link it to as well, that if you were a lawyer and you thought ahead to those, I mean, that's amazing, because you can have a look at these different things that impact. Trends in terms of businesses just struggling generally with costs at the moment. If you think from a law firm's point of view, the businesses are, with the current state of the climate, we'll go big now, like macro, where you could either be this country or globally. Everyone seems to be tightening their belts, and you really don't want to face a hefty IP claim amongst that climate too. So there's things like that in the advanced stage that I've been mentioning to say, well, we've also got to think about our clients' financial situation and what's the best thing for them to advise. And just to link back to what I was saying with the settlement of Aldi and M&S, just because it didn't go all the way to court, that would have cost so much money to get there, in legal fees. And either way, it's probably stung both sides. I know that there would have been a payment that has gone out from one to the other. We don't know who, we can only assume. But there would have been a lot of legal fees that have gone into that as well. So there's all considerations to think about.
And what are some of the potential unintended consequences businesses should be aware of with these claims? Obviously, we've talked about the money and the legal side of protecting the brand, but what are some of the other unintended consequences behind it?
So you very, very helpfully, Dan, mentioned the social media side of this. And Aldi have, I think, not from a lawyer point of view, but from a consumer point of view, come out on top massively with what's happened. Yeah. They were facing a huge claim from another giant. Of course, they're a supermarket giant, but M&S, saying, you've infringed this. But the trends online were like, M&S, what are you doing? Aldi made a massive opportunity out of it and have just soared through. And again, confidential settlements aside, reputationally, you've got to think about that. So the other impact, to answer your question, M&S probably didn't think that they would come out hit in this way reputationally. I think it just made more people want Cuthbert, because Cuthbert was in jail, as we all know. Free Cuthbert, let him out. And every time I went to have a little nosy, there was none left. So Aldi, commercially, if you think of their general income, you couldn't get one. It was like a status symbol and kind of like a class thing as well. There was a lot coming out with M&S saying, well, if you're going to charge however much more for it and it's the same or similar, let people have what they can afford in the budget. And why are you being so heavy on things and, restricting accessibility? Some people were saying, just leave it be, leave it as it is. So that's, nobody would have expected it. But I think in legal cases in future, if you think about thinking outside of the box with this advanced stage and the commercial element of it, you might think, how would that hit M&S commercially? Well, it has, because I imagine more people, when they see Colin, they might not buy it now and they'd be thinking, they were really annoying, let's go and buy it from somewhere else. So that's really interesting, I think.
Yeah, and it was, as you said, it was from a few years ago, and the fact that it's kind of stuck in, it's kind of the staple of these sort of cases does show a lot. And I think you can kind of tell it with a lot of brands in this space where they kind of use similar sort of products, that they are kind of almost baiting for that same engagement some of the times, in which they make comparisons, or in which they're kind of almost like teasing comparisons in order to gain traction. So not only are they maybe worried about, not only should they be concerned with the potential costs of actually paying for these sort of suits, but also the benefits of the increased publicity or increased sales could outweigh that potentially. So it's it's one of the things that need to be weighed up by firms. Do you see any other trends emerging in this space as we round out the advanced level?
Any other trends in future? I do feel like we'll start to see more risk taken on social media. You just need to scroll through what's happened with this recently, and some of other targeted companies like batting and forth. So I think there was an advert about you might remember this, Dan, spelling out the name of something with the letters of a vegetable or a fruit from a certain supermarket, and then others were taking the mick out of it and then saying like, we'll do our own version, and like really like tit for tat with the companies. So the trend that I think will emerge from that is obviously with the rise of even more interaction on social media, and how big businesses are coming across really familiar and friendly, and really going quite informal with their communication. I think we'll start to see a lot more of that, which I'm all for, because the more transparency we have, the better. I think there'll be more people being engaged in strategic social media and communication roles that maybe might be more trained in legal as well, so they can determine what legal risk to take. I always used to think, well, I would hate to be so-and-so's lawyer, like being constantly pushed, can I post this? Can I post this? But I think we'll start to see a trend of them roles being merged and people just taking more risk on it anyway, and then dealing with the fallout afterwards, knowing that the reputational part, they've always got threat of a big following on social media to combat it. So I would watch out for all of those things. And I'm not saying as a lawyer in future you guys will be advising companies to do that, but I think you will see a trend that you are advising on how they go about it to make sure that the businesses stay viable.
Nice one. So I think that nicely rounds out the advanced level. So as we go into the the advanced level, it's about thinking like a commercial advisor, anticipating future challenges and helping clients position themselves advantageously. So thank you for joining us today, Emma. It's been a really interesting topic, and I'm sure it will take a lot away from it. And thank you for everyone for joining today's Commercial Awareness Compass. Remember, being commercially aware isn't just about following the news. It's about understanding how these developments shape business decisions and legal strategies. Whether you're just starting out or thinking like a commercial advisor, always ask, how does this impact clients, and what can a law firm do to help? Join us next week to keep building your commercial awareness. And until then, prepare without the panic. Thank you.